As chair of the President's Council on Service and Civic Participation, I also run something called the CASE Foundation, which is our private family foundation. And it's truly my joy and my pleasure to be together with this great group of folks up here on the stage, and hopefully to bring an interesting conversation to you. One of the things I'm most excited about is we've seen the conversation play out today, looking for innovative strategies to drive service forward in the nation. You know, we haven't talked a lot about the private sector yet. We've seen a lot of innovative discussions coming out of the lunchtime from academia. We heard a lot of themes this morning about the role of the private sector and some important social issues of our day. But this panel is exclusively focused on the private sector and the terrific leverage that we might see coming out of the private sector. These folks have been chosen for the most part because they're activists in the private sector. They're great leaders, they're modeling, and we thought it'd be a great opportunity to hear from each one of them today. There's some real diverse views up here, and I think the best thing about the panel is, as I saw each one of them this morning, they each said, I think it's going to be fun. So we hope it's going to be fun for you guys, and we'll try to do what we can to make it that while still being informative. I want to start with brief introductions, and then we're going to go right to questions. So to my left is Kenneth Cole from Kenneth Cole Productions. And as you may know, Kenneth has been a real activist on the social front, using his corporate assets to drive a social agenda. Service is a part of that. And I'm a big fan of Kenneth's apparel, and many of us know his apparel and his shoes, so thanks for being here, Kenneth. David Eisner is an important voice on our panel. I know to those of us here at ServiceNation, David is well known to us. But to many Americans, they have never heard of the organization that David runs on behalf of the federal government that looks after over $1 billion of federal resources, largely applied to service. So we're going to go to David a few times today and ask him the question, so how can private sector be a partner in national service to really drive things forward? Thank you, David, for being here. Jim Quigley from Deloitte, Deloitte's CEO, is next to David. And Jim is known as a leader in a variety of fronts, both personally through his efforts with nonprofits and his activism on that front. But also, Deloitte was an early leader for an initiative we'll talk about on this panel that's been called the Pro Bono Initiative in the corporate sector. Jim and his company in February helped us launch this with the President's Council and stepped up with a $50 million commitment to that campaign, and we'll talk more about it on the panel. Next to Jim is John Rice, GE's vice chair. And you know, GE has been such a leader in so many markets on so many fronts. And I don't know how well known their philanthropy is and their commitment to service. And so we want to explore with John not only what it's doing today, but the lessons that they've learned since they started their foundation in 1953. And then the lady all the way at the end of the table is no stranger to this crowd, Laisha Ward, who's president of the Target Foundation. I think many of you know that Target has a very unique commitment to give back 5% to communities around the nation where they have a presence, and in their home city of the Twin Cities in Minnesota. We heard from Laisha last night, she gave us an overview. But to give you an idea of scale, Target's commitment today represents about $3 million a week going into communities for good. And so thank you, Laisha, for being with us and for all that Target does for our communities. I think we'll probably start with David, if you can kind of tee up the discussion, because again, if we reflect on the conversations to this point, we've been very focused on national service in the nation, and you know, you have many millions of volunteers, many programs that are national service oriented. How do you see the opportunities that folks on this panel and people out in the community from the private sector standpoint, what can they do for national service and what difference can they make?
Well, they can make an amazing difference. I do want to just spend 5 seconds saying that the last 24 hours has been among the best 24 hours I can recall. The bipartisan nature of the support for national service and volunteering, and how well formed people's thoughts are about the role of different sectors in this. I would say, you know, the last panel we had at lunch spoke about whether we would be able to get enough youth joining AmeriCorps when we grew from 75,000 to 250. I think that this question about the opportunities for the private sector is huge. Our programs currently match their federal contribution to the tune of $400 million a year that they raise. And so when we're talking about tripling, quadrupling the federal contribution, we're also talking about needing to raise that private and municipal match. And so we're really talking about moving to more than $1 billion that would need to come from the private sector. One of the more interesting things that we find is that most of our programs get most of their dollars from organizations that are very, very local. There are a few organizations that are supporting a lot of national service activities. For example, State Farm. Anywhere that you see service learning around this country, you'll see that State Farm has staked out an investment, and that's cost them about $15 million. But there's a lot of really good opportunities as we see this growth for business to think about partnership.
John Rice, if I can turn to you, I know that you are a leader in several fronts in bringing business coalitions together, but GE is a leader too, and looking back over GE's history since it started its foundation, GE's made conscious choices to focus on education, the communities that they serve in. We've seen them play an active role globally, but they were early to the game in terms of activism from a corporate standpoint in some of these things, particularly around education curriculum at the higher ed level, making some international investments in the 1980s in places like Brazil and Mexico and China, long before we knew the title of BRIC countries or understood that the developing world needed extra infusion of resources. Can you talk a little bit about GE's view of its role specifically around service and what you think other companies might learn from that?
Well, Jean, I think a couple of themes emerge from the answer to that question. One is around sustainability. The question that we get into a lot is it's really not as much a question about corporate philanthropy, because we can all write checks and give money away, and we do that, but you really want to spend your time, and some of your money anyways, on the stuff that will inure after you're maybe done contributing or you've moved on to something else. And so the question for us a lot of times is around sustainability and how do we create processes that will carry on and accelerate. And so what we did as part of our foundation work is to concentrate. Rather than being a mile wide and inch deep and sprinkling a lot of money around a lot of places, we concentrated. You mentioned one area, which is education. And the way we selected those areas was to look at what our employees were interested in, because we want to marry our corporate effort with the effort that will engage the most employees, because like a lot of your companies, I suspect our challenge still is to get, it's the 80-20 rule, right? 20% or 30% of our employees supply 80% of the effort. So as proud as we are of what's going on, we can still do more by engaging a broader base.
So, Leisha, you've been an important leader in this pro bono movement that I talked about earlier, and let me take just a minute and explain what that's all about. In February, we came together with a number of different partners, including Target, UPS, and Deloitte, and some nonprofit organizations as well, to help take forward a framework. And the reason that this initiative was brought forward was we had looked around in the marketplace and seen very clearly a couple of really important changes taking place. Gen Y was rising. This young generation of people are asking much more from the companies they'll go to work for than the generations that came before them. They want more than just a job. They want the opportunity to be a full person in every way, every day. And that means opportunities to give back. And they're looking at companies and making competitive choices around where some of the best and brightest will go based on the role these companies are willing to commit to them and allow them to play as actually part of their careers, and how will they support that effort. Similarly, consumers are making those choices every day in the products and services they're purchasing. They want to see the companies that they're buying products and services from playing an activist role in their communities as well. So it sets up an interesting business model for companies, because for the first time, there's really, and maybe not the first time, but a measurable, undeniable business case that says it can be good for business to invest in these things. I can attract the best and brightest talent and keep them if I do a good job at this. I can be more competitive in the marketplace with my products and services if I do this. And when I think of Target, aside from your leadership around this effort, Laisha, which calls on U.S. companies to come together with $1 billion in professional talent comprised out of 5 focus areas of finance, marketing, technology, business planning, and recruiting. When I think of Target and I think about the way you've deployed your teams in communities and even your larger approach to pro bono, can you talk a little bit as a company, what benefits have you seen from infusing talent out into the community?
Certainly, Jean. I think you hit on a point, which is it's a recruitment and retention strategy. Certainly we know that corporate social responsibility is an important part of why people choose to work for a company, and certainly why they choose to stay at a company. And so for us, it's been important to ensure that our philanthropic programs are closely aligned with our HR team's goals and objectives. And so Target's been successful with our corporate philanthropy initiatives in that we ensure that they're strategically aligned with our business goals. And to the extent that they're aligned with our business goals, we're able to take business partners across the organization to ensure that we are then maximizing the benefits of our endeavors and making it something that is really a part of everyone's job description, not just the community relations team. So we have really been able to develop talent across the organization who want to be involved in community relations activities, pro bono being one. This next week, for example, we are making over 23 elementary school libraries around the nation, which aligns with our commitment to education. Our construction and design teams who help us build over 100 Target stores a year, and our vendor partners who help us build those stores are actively engaged in designing those elementary school libraries in partnership with our team members and partnerships with local communities. And what we're able then to do is to use the skills and expertise of those team members to actually help make the learning environments for those schools better. It creates really a hands-on opportunity for our team members at the local level to get involved as well, and it puts a face on our commitment to education at the local level, which at the end of the day for us is really critical, because every local Target store is filled with local Target team members, and that's the impression that our guests gets as it relates to the Target store brand. So we're really proud that we're able to leverage that expertise, whether it's in HR, in product and design, in marketing, and in legal services and a host of others, assets protection, and to leverage Target's business expertise on behalf of Community Solutions is something that traditionally has been used for professional services firms. And so this notion that pro bono is something that can and should extend outside of that realm is an important message that we're hoping to continue to share, not only throughout our organization, but with others, so that others come into the fold and are able then to track and evaluate the strategies around it, because it's clearly the objectives that you apply to developing any other business project are really critical in developing a pro bono initiative. And so we're really working to put best practices around that work and set standards around the work that allow us to do an even better job of making a meaningful impact and then being able to sustain the work.
Great. So Kenneth, I think when we first talked, I had read about Kenneth this great quote that said, "It's good to be known for your shoes. It's better to be known for your soul," which I thought was a great quote. I love talking to Kenneth because, I started the conversation by saying, well, what strategic approach do you bring to align service with your company mission? And Kenneth gave a very refreshing answer. And so can you talk about your approach to service and your messaging to your teams and what you enable in your environment?
Thank you, Jean. So to begin with absolute respect, I don't totally agree with what Laisha was just saying, because I think the commitment to service has to be holistic, and I think that the consumer is very smart today, and it can't be an initiative. It's not a marketing initiative. People used to ask us, we've been doing what we've been doing pretty much from the company's inception, and we did our first AIDS awareness campaign in 1985. I've been on the board of ANFAR since 1986. I've been its chairman for 4 years. And, but it's very much, it's inherent in the brand, in the designer, in the individual, the CEO, and the company. It's who we are. People come there often because of that, but we don't do it for that reason, in effect, and we never did. And I think that's part of the reason why the business has evolved to where it is, and I think it just needs to be real. And and overall the message has been, and we've said to the customer, it's not just what you look like on the outside, it's who you are on the inside. It's a much more substantive message that sustains any one season, any one product offering, and it makes us all feel better about what we do every day. Today, in the private sector, or public sector too, you can't succeed, you can't prevail in a 40-hour work week. You can't work 9 to 5 and expect to accomplish what you're going to need to. So at the end of the day, you need to feel better about it because you're making life compromises every day, and you're making choices to be one place as opposed to others. So, so I did this campaign in 1985. It put a lot at risk because nobody was talking about HIV then. Because if you did, you were presumed to be at risk. You're presumed to either be gay, Haitian, or an intravenous drug user. And I was a single male designer, so we knew which one I would be. But maybe because I wasn't, I was okay making this very visible and exerted public commitment to awareness. And the reason nobody was talking about HIV is because, with the reason that we did the campaign, because of the pervasiveness of stigma. And you were presumed to be part of a community that was less than appropriate or questionably desirable. So I went down that role, and we've done that ever since. And it has, we didn't do it for business reasons, but at the end of the day, I think it has maybe accomplished the greatest business reason. It's given us a kind of a genuine point of view and a specific place of individuality and purpose, and it's inspiring. And we're right now working on a book that's called Awareness, How to Make a Difference, which is going to be out about 4 weeks. We thought we were way ahead of the curve, and then we hear about this conference, and I said, oh man, so much about being ahead of the curve. But this is so important, and that's, the subtext also is no good deed goes unpublished. And but it's how to create inspiring stories and how to create life examples of how you can do extraordinary things with ordinary resources. And what we're living and experiencing these last 24 hours is a perfect testament to that.
But I thank you for that, because I think it does underscore that a lot of different models and approaches can work. And I also think it embodies a real entrepreneurial approach to how we look at engaging employees and engaging the private sector around in our communities. I want to make clear what Ken just mentioned, the awareness campaign. If you saw it on a logo, you'd see the WEAR as W-E-A-R, so it's very clever. But we're looking forward to that, and I know there's a book that's coming out with it, and it's just great. So let's go to measurement for a minute, because in the same way the business model has been questioned through time. I know when we put a corporate challenge out there on the Pro Bono 1 billion challenge, and in a lot of things we do around service, people question, well, where's the measurement, both in terms of how do we know that was real, and then how do we find the impact, how do we measure the impact, to know that it was a good investment of time and resources. And Jim, from Deloitte's standpoint, I know when we were together in February in New York, several people commented afterwards about your unique approach to how you measure service, but more importantly, how you measure the value of employee time spent serving. Because companies can talk a good game about it's a good thing to serve, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't really get the attention of your management and it doesn't really lift you up within your environment, you question if that value is real. So can you talk a little bit about how the measurement systems you've employed around your pro bono efforts?
Well, I certainly am unapologetic about the notion of a business case for service. I think the business case is there. I think it's clear, and I think that's what helps make this whole activity sustainable. And then in terms of what we did with the pro bono program, and I give Evan Hochberg from our firm a huge credit for being the engine and the idea and really advocating. But we, from the tone at the top, embraced this, moved it forward. And the soundbite that I would use to try to describe what we did that made it different was we integrated it into the business model, and just fundamentally integrating pro bono services at the planning level, and then making that happen at every level of the enterprise. You can imagine in a professional services firm, what matters to us is, billable hours and utilization. And if you're saying to your people, we want you also to, in addition to meet all these billable hours and utilization goals, we also want you to be active in your community. It's a message that's hard for them to embrace, and especially if the program that you're asking them to make a difference on is very consuming. And so what we did with the pro bono and just integrating that into the business model is we allow those hours devoted to those projects that are approved to actually count the same way that other billable hours would count. And we actually value the time that that professional is devoting the same way we'd value it if they were billing it to a client that would actually had sold the service. And it actually goes on revenue reports and it goes on utilization reports exactly the same. And then it's only at the very top where we write that receivable off and call it part of our contribution. But we make that decision at the top. We don't make the business unit be accountable for their revenue goals by not being able to generate the revenue with that time that those people are devoting. And we don't penalize the individuals because their utilization statistics aren't as strong as perhaps others that they may be evaluated against. But by integrating the pro bono activity directly into the business model, and right from the building the 3-year business plan, making the $50 million commitment, putting in place the infrastructure in each of the regions for projects to be advocated, those projects to be approved, and then to put a real results orientation on them has made a difference for us, and I believe is going to make a difference also for our people. And I love the comment about the soul, by the way, because I think that's the other reason that we do this is I'm interested in arms and legs, but what I really care about is hearts and minds. And when you see the twinkle in the eyes of your people, then you know you've gotten something to their soul, and their commitment to Deloitte is different. And that's what really helps make the business case resonate, because it makes a huge difference in the talent market.
So let's talk a little bit, if we can. I referenced GE's early efforts in the global realm long before it was kind of fashionable. This conference is called ServiceNation, but I think we'd all agree that it's more about service in the nation serving the larger world. GE's been there. They've done a lot of neat things for a long time. And John, how does GE look at the decision to spend its resources globally? And what do you think are the opportunities that you're seeing emerge that other companies might, jump into? For instance, we've seen work going on that's so exciting in AIDS in Africa, malaria, tuberculosis, et cetera, clean water. But what are some initiatives or some areas in the global markets that you think could be exciting for service?
Well, it's kind of interesting, Jean, because as I look at the companies that are involved in this, and there are many great ones that do a lot, the same can be said for all of them. If you're a company, you're in the business of solving problems, meeting needs, and being an attractive place for your investors to park their money, or you're going out of business over a short time or a long time. And the same can be said for efforts to solve the world's problems. I mean, global healthcare, rural electrification in India, clean water in lots of places. There are 2 billion people in this world that don't have access to the basics. And our efforts around trying to help solve those problems are around creating sustainable results, as I talked about before, and you do that by ultimately creating attractive places for people to put their capital. So we may do something to start, but our goal is to create an equation that works for people who want to invest, because that's the sustainable solution. We can drop 15 water purification units into Indian villages, and in 2 years they won't work because they won't have parts, there won't be people around to maintain them, and all that stuff. But if we work with the local government and we create a distributor and we bring parts and we teach people how to maintain the equipment, then 15 can become 500. So it has to be an attractive, there really has to be an attractive business proposition. Otherwise, we're giving stuff away, and at some point, we learn this in healthcare, it won't work. And it won't be sustainable. We got to find sustainable answers. And so whether it's healthcare in India or clean water in rural China, the same is true applied to the broad set of technologies that are necessary to solve those problems.
John, I agree. And at the Case Foundation, we've been invested in something known as play pumps, and it's a children's merry-go-round. And as the children spin on it, it brings clean water up from deep in the ground. The federal government partnered with us, and it's a $60 million campaign, and they were early with a $10 million investment. And it's a great public-private partnership because that $10 million of early money by the federal government leverages $50 million in private sector money. But it's really interesting what you bring up, and I want to turn to David on this because, you know, we were talking in some of the earlier sessions today about is service competitive with the military, what is, you know, USAID is out there. But meanwhile, we have these broad challenges globally, and more often infusion of cash, but not human capital. As we think about expanding our national service programs, would you see an alignment where the federal government has an interest in these developing countries and these global issues of bringing human capital to work on some of these things?
I think this is the key. One of the areas that I've started to hear today some real focus on is not just talking about volunteering as about allowing people an opportunity to give back, or about what we teach our young people, but about how do we address core problems. And whether we're talking domestically about preventing people from making sure that people graduate high school, helping prisoners who are, you know, 700,000 of them are released from our prisons and end up on the front doorsteps of our community with no place to live and no place to work. Or we're talking internationally where we're trying, you know, how can you help educate a kid that doesn't have fresh water? We have to understand that the human capital is the strongest capital that we actually have to invest. And I think we're beginning to see in conferences like this and from a lot of policymakers that folks are willing to invest in people, because we know that if you look at a child of a prisoner who has a 70% likelihood themselves of going to prison without an intervention, the single best intervention we have is a volunteer that's willing to stand up and say, I care, and I will mentor that child for an hour a week for a year. That cuts the likelihood that they're going to go to prison in half. And we don't have a better intervention.
Right.
So we're starting to see policy dollars, federal dollars, and state dollars going to support organizations, not to pay the mentors, but to build the infrastructure that enables the recruitment of those volunteers. And I think we're seeing internationally through programs like Volunteers for Prosperity, the same kind of investment. Last year, 43,000 professionals used professional skills overseas as volunteers to help with health and clean water. And that's the kind of investment that I would hope to see corporate America be willing to support, so that if you care deeply about education or about AIDS in Africa, that you're not just providing the resources and the money, but that you're willing to help either provide or support the people that are ultimately going to be core to the solution.
Kenneth, you seem to be nodding your head. In your work with AIDS, do you want to comment on this topic that we're on about the need for sort of, if you will, a form of boots on the ground to help us take forward our global strategy and key issues?
I don't know what I can add specifically to what David just said, but I think that at the end of the day, you know, we have to live our message, and we can sit and advocate and we can sit and talk about it, but I mean, government has expressed over the years its lack of willingness and in many cases resources to serve these various communities to the degree they need to. So it's incumbent upon individuals in business to essentially support the hand that feeds them. And I believe, by the way, that all business will get there. Either their hearts will get them there or their balance sheet will get them there. But one way or another, I think people realize that there is a very appropriate place and they need to figure it out. At the end of the day, I think it serves your myriad of agendas, and there are extraordinary opportunities, and we all know that the greatest beneficiary invariably is usually the giver, not the recipient, and we feel that as individuals and also collectively and individually. I think the business feels it, and that's something I think that you're hearing, and we know we feel it as individuals.
Laisha, we talked a little bit, you know, Target's a really big company, as evidenced by the $3 million a week that they invest in communities. But really, they're kind of like a small company to the extent that they really care deeply about their local presence, and they want to go deep in the communities where they do have a presence. So we often have these conversations in panels, and small business people say, oh, that's great, you know, if you have teams of thousands of people or billions of dollars in revenues or whatever. But what can I, as a small business person, do? Can you maybe just provide some thoughts? You are close to the small business community in a sense. Target at the local level is a little bit like a small business. What do you think are some of the, if we think about it more,
nothing says small business like 350,000 team members and 1,600.
Maybe if we think about it more from a local business and a local community, you know, how do they, I mean, they're really not thinking about global strategies. They're thinking about, in my neighborhood, in my zip code, and the people I serve, how do I deploy my assets that could be effective from a service standpoint? And because you are local and because you are close to your customer base, you know, how do you see those opportunities?
I think it's just, you know, staying authentic and ensuring that you're very close to understanding who the consumer is. And for us, I think we do a great job of understanding who our core guest is. And so regardless of your size, understanding who your core audiences are, I think, is really critical to your success. So whether it's understanding who our guest is and what their needs are from a shopping perspective, or understanding who our core guest is and what her interests are, primarily from a giving perspective, I think that helps us be successful. So whether you're a small business, a medium-sized business, or a large, investing in understanding who that core guest is, I think, is key to your success. We do lots of research as a company on our core guests, and similarly in our giving, we do regular surveys on what our core guests' interests are from a giving perspective. What are their thoughts around corporate responsibility? Where is it that they think big companies or companies of any size should be investing their resources? What's their level of awareness of giving? Would they like that to be local or global in nature? Where do they get information on our giving? And so this notion, again, that you're very close to who the guest is, I think is critical. And that's something that you can and should do regardless of size. It's also then important to understand who your team member population is. For us, we call our employees team members. So we also continue to survey them. You know, where are your interests, and how can we ensure that our corporate interests align with our team members' interests, so that there is synergy across the things that are good for the business, good for our team members, and good for the community. And that strategic alignment really ensures that we're doing things that are good for all of those stakeholders, and they're not mutually exclusive concepts, and that we're able to track that over time and to make that value proposition a very clear one. Again, that isn't competing. I mean, there's this healthy tension often that it can't be good for the community and good for the business. And they can be good for all parties. And for us, ensuring then that the work is authentic at the local level is based on listening at the local level, and then ensuring that the work is implemented in a way that still ladders up to our overall corporate objectives, but leaves some flexibility to respond to local needs, and that's been very successful for us. So our team members have a say within a strategic framework on where dollars go and where their volunteer time and hours go, but we provide resources and best practices and the kinds of things that make the work, I think, successful because it has measurable social impact, but it's also simple to execute, given the realities of the world in which we work. So even understanding how your business operates, you know, what's your team member population like? You know, if it's all professional services versus a team member population that's working a 24-hour shift, is it union or non-union?
Right.
Just being very sensitive to the business allows you to be practical, and then to market it in a way that is appealing. I would suggest in this business that it's a lot of times it's us talking to ourselves, and that drives me crazy, right? We're all at this conference, we're all believers.
Right.
And
No,
so,
it's a really important point, and in fact, it was where I was going to go next, Laisha, is that we are all believers. We know that, but you know, Jim is on the panel with us as a CEO of a large organization who made an early commitment. The problem is really not, or the opportunity is not talking to people in this room, but talking to all the people who aren't in this room, right? And one of our partners in some of these initiatives we've been talking about on the panel is an alliance called the Committee to Encourage Corporate Philanthropy. And they recently did a survey and it said that 94% of CEOs say they're directly involved in the decisions that are made around using time, talent, and resources of their organization for sort of the greater good, if you will. But Jim, that being the case, you know, there still are just a ton of companies who are not in the game, and particularly not able to see the leveraged investment nature around service. What do you think are the big barriers here? I mean, why is it still kind of a great core group of companies going forward? Obviously, our initiative was intended to widen the tent, but what are the key barriers and what do we need to be doing about it?
Well, I just think it's the whole challenge of making choices and then people feeling that these things are mutually exclusive. And that's why I like to go to that integration thought. It's not, should I do this or this other business activity that I know is actually going to help produce profits. It's, if I do this, i.e. service, that's going to enable my recruitment, my retention, my excitement, my ability to get to the hearts and minds of my people and get their passion. And then they're going to be able to actually produce more value as they engage in this other activity. But I think it's trying to market that message that service should be integrated into the business model. It isn't just simply something that you try to balance into the business model, but it's a very different way of thinking about this whole notion of, social responsibility and how, in fact, you can actually reach the minds of those that we're trying to recruit. You heard at lunch what it is they're learning academically.
Right.
You heard also on the panel what it is that they deeply believe in. If as an employer, as you're competing for talent, you decide you're going to set that aside until you actually have the time to then make the decision to devote some energy there, they're going to be gone and they will have moved on in another direction. And so that's why I think it is so critical to think about the competition for not just, in my case, professional services, but also the competition for talent. And then how do you do that and do that well? And I think it becomes a reinforcing, integrated part of your business. And that's what we're working to achieve. There's much more we need to do at Deloitte. We do not have this done by any stretch. There's much more we can and should do. But the direction we're moving, I'm excited about. And our people are excited about it as well.
And so, Kenneth, one question I have for you, obviously another corporate leader making these decisions. We're in really tough economic times right now, and a question we often get as we go out into communities and talk about services, what's going to happen to corporate commitments? Are they going to cut back because they're looking at, cutbacks in other areas? What are your peers thinking in the corporate sector, and how do you look at the role of the larger economic environment as you think about these things?
Well, I think that to the degree you feel you choose to do it, to do service, or to the degree you choose you are supposed to do service. It's social responsibility, but I think it's also social accountability. To the degree you feel that it's a responsibility and that at the end of the day there is a return on that, ROI, return on involvement, and that in fact that is a likely scenario, it's hard to make the case that that should go. And I also think in light of what I said before, the realities of the world around us, it's even more critical. I think that people realize the need to do this. And one of the things I often say is you need to put yourself often in the customer's shoes, and you realize you need to do this in the hope that they'll put themselves in mind.
Okay. And your soul. So I want to go back. I want to go one by one and just get some quick responses to. As Kenneth pointed out and others on the panel, there's a set of diverse approaches to how companies embrace service and overall giving. Can you go down the panel, starting with Leisha? What are your corporate policies? Do you give people days off? How do you approach service? And sort of just boom, boom, boom. What's your policy? Do you have one?
It happens both on work time and off of work time at Target. And it is both a part of its success, and it's also a part of the bane of my existence, right? So when you are a very large organization and one that has giving and service ingrained in its DNA, and a company that was founded on the legacy of service, and one that is comprised of very innovative leaders who are encouraged to make things happen, guess what? That's what they do in giving as well. And so at the end of the day, what we've been able to do is allow our program to grow because it is bottoms up in our approach. So it's not a tops down. Certainly our senior leadership team supports our giving efforts, but the fire in the belly that comes from the leaders across the country who are in our local stores and in local communities that has made this program great means that people are doing it on work time, off work time, they're bringing their friends and their family, and they're not tracking the hours in the way that I'd like them to. There is just this energy that has kept me here for 16 years, but keeps me up at night because people just do it. And for us, as we try to harness that energy, we continue to look at, what are the implications of having it on work time, what
Right.
does that mean from a payroll perspective. There are lots of implications around it, and so we've chosen to keep it what I'd call organized chaos, because there is an energy that we don't want to lose in over-formalizing the program, so it's both for us.
Okay. John, what about you?
We set broad themes from a corporate perspective and kind of a way to think about it, but to the extent that we can, we want the local teams and businesses in their communities to do what makes sense. And the leverage we're trying to get is this small corner store approach to solving a problem in a particular city or a particular country, but the power of significant corporate resources when they need to be there.
Okay. Jim, you've talked a little bit about the $50 million commitment, but I mean, beyond that, policy-wise, how do you look at service more broadly?
One other thing that we do that's very tangible and also very significant is we have something we call our Impact Day, where we take a work day and we then just simply deploy 50,000 people into more than 2,000 different projects to make a difference. And it helps set the tone. It helps to demonstrate that volunteering is important to us. We try to do as much of that as we can in a skills-based kind of way. And it's significant. I mean, the opportunity cost associated with 50,000 people on a Friday, we could bill a lot of hours if we didn't do that, trust me. But importantly, it sends a message about that volunteering is important, and then our people use their discretionary time to continue to be volunteers in the community. And I think it helps build leaders, and it makes a difference in the communities where we live and work. And I believe it makes a difference in terms of how the Deloitte people feel about our culture and who we are. But our Impact Day is one very tangible way we try to encourage service and volunteering.
David, can I come back to you because I want to put a twist on that question, but Kenneth?
Well, we've discussed this before. I've struggled with that a little bit, and I think it's great what you guys do, Jim. I don't know. I think for some reason imposed volunteerism feels like an oxymoron, but and I think it doesn't have the same value. But I think we have a responsibility to create those opportunities. I don't think we've done it well enough, and we always struggle with that for people to avail themselves of the benefit of service. And we haven't imposed it, and we don't take attendance, and we don't ask questions, and we're creating a plan now where we'll match hours and stuff, but we don't. I've struggled with that too, because I don't want them to have to stand up and raise their hand, because I almost feel that it's.
We don't get 100%, but getting 50,000, I feel pretty good about.
Yeah.
No, it's great. It's great, actually.
Absolutely. And I think it is an area that people really scratch their heads over. There was a early effort several years ago called Businesses Serving America, in which there was a call out to businesses to give time off to volunteer. So there is this sort of tension, I think. I mean, one is our kids call it voluntold. If we say, will you volunteer to go do this? They say, well, that's being voluntold. And it's a bad attitude kind of thing. But at the same time, you want to enable people, if they do want to go serve, you want to encourage it, you want to inspire it, you want to enable it. And I know from where a lot of us sit in this room, we'd love to measure it too. We're sure a lot of service takes place that's contributing, that's just sort of unknown. But I think about groups like City Year, and this will be the last question, then we're going to go to questions from our audience. But I think about organizations like City Year, a great AmeriCorps program, obviously a big part of bringing us together here at ServiceNation. And I've seen firsthand how companies are in absolute teamwork with City Year's AmeriCorps workers on the ground in communities across the nation, and it's exciting to see. But David, how often does it happen that as companies deploy human capital out there, they work through AmeriCorps, or they try to be in alignment with national service programs? Do you see much of that, and what are some good examples?
We see it more as a three-way, where companies will partner, whether it's with Kaboom, or with Habitat for Humanity, or with City Year, or with Teach for America on their day of Principle for a Day, and those organizations will use their AmeriCorps members to basically manage all of the corporate volunteers. I should note, Points of Light and Hands On also does manages the members a lot that way. And I would also note it's sort of an indication of how backwards government is, that the debate that we have at the corporation is around whether our volunteers are allowed to spend any of their time earning money. Which is the
a very different problem to have,
Yeah.
right. Well, I think we do want to open it up for questions from the audience, and I encourage your questions because I do think it's just such a great group of folks we have up here. Steve Culbertson. Do we have a mic back there? Yeah, Steve, they're bringing a mic.
Steve Culbertson from Youth Service America. One of the successes we've had is getting employers to bring their children along at volunteer opportunities, or to set them up where young people are actually leading their parents and getting their parents' peers out for service projects. I'm wondering if any of you have tried that strategy in ways of getting family volunteering as part of your efforts, but in particular making sure that kids are seen as assets and resources within the context of employee volunteering.
I can take that one. I think for Target, one of the things that's been interesting about our giving program is this notion of segmentation, right? So we look at our guests in a segmented way, and we've taken the same approach with our team members. And as we look at how they like to be engaged in service based on their life stages at Target, we found, coming out of the college campus, they want to go volunteer in PACs. They're coming from the college campus, that's very successful. They get integrated into the corporate culture. As they progress and start to have families, or as their children reach different stages of development, ensuring that we're able to engage them as a family has become very important, and a great strategy for us to ensure that, one, we're enabling them to be able to volunteer, but are also allowing them to serve as role models with and for their children. And so, gosh, over a decade ago, in fact, we funded a study to look at this notion of family volunteerism and service, and ways that we can engage more families in volunteerism. And we've continued then over the years to look at opportunities to ensure that our volunteer activities are framed in a way that make it inviting and engaging. Are there projects that are age appropriate? Are we really ensuring that there are meaningful things for the family to do together? And that, literally things is, you have t-shirts in the right size. I mean, some of this is just basic and practical, so are you making it truly a robust and meaningful experience? And one, hopefully, then, that is sustainable, because it creates this notion of service that can extend beyond that project, which means our model of service opportunities, the menu that we create, has to take that into account. And we have to ensure that that is something that can play out, obviously, at the local level, given that we have a program that's quite decentralized. But it's a very important part of our strategy. And it means not just children, it now means grandchildren. And then the grandchildren, certainly then create a different kind of dynamic, because you have intergenerational volunteerism that we're addressing at this stage as well.
Jean, can I?
Sure.
I just want to note, Steve, to your question, that the research over the last few years has really confirmed that when a kid volunteers, they're far more likely to volunteer later in life.
Right.
But it also has confirmed that if a kid has any adult relative that volunteers, including uncles and aunts, they are more than twice as likely to volunteer themselves later in life as if they don't have any relative that volunteers.
Yeah, leveraged opportunity. We'll bring the microphone down, and we're in the front.
I'm Michael Weiser, Chair of the National Conference on Citizenship. Even as we begin to ask Congress to appropriate $3+ billion in service initiatives, there is a looming measurement tool out there that we and the Corporation for National and Community Service are, in a sense, shepherding together, called the Civic Health Index. What about measurement tools in the corporate world? Do they exist for actual social impact? And do you think corporations would be more willing to engage in service if those measurement tools existed?
And let me add one twist on your question, and I want panel members to answer it. A question that has come up recently is whether it might make sense for companies to create a collaborative around targeted social issues, exactly for this reason, Michael. So that if you're targeting literacy and you come together, so let's say 3 companies here say all of our volunteers and our corporate giving, or a portion of it will go to literacy, they know that together they have kind of a partnership and a way to measure that impact. But do you want to answer Michael's question, any panelists here?
I'm not sure that there's a macro approach to how you're going to measure, and what you're actually developing has the potential of being very helpful. I will say, as our people compete for the $50 million and they want that in their community, on their, with their nonprofit where they think they can really make a difference, as they write up the proposal, they have to say, and here's why I want Deloitte dollars to fund this and the impact it's going to have, and then we're going to create accountability on a results-oriented basis, and we're going to do it one project at a time as our people are competing for that $50 million in each of the regions.
Is there a true test function?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, there will be a third-party validation by one of our partners actually evaluating the results of that project. And especially if that partner then advocates another project and this other one went bust, the likelihood of getting the second one funded goes down dramatically.
And Michael, from a foundation standpoint, what I would say, and we embrace this in partnerships with corporations, we do as well, if you know early on what your return on investment is expected to be, and that can take a variety of forms, and you're able to articulate that at the time you're making a grant, then you have a template to come back and judge it by down the road. And I've seen a lot of companies do that.
And I'd suggest that for us, again, it's similar. On the front end of any project, what are your objectives? What's the strategy? What does success look like? And then on the back end, you're able to measure your success against those objectives. That said, it's complicated. You have a lot of projects, a lot of partnerships. They're not all created equally. But to that end, measurement is clearly a huge trend in all sectors. And to that end, we formulated an operations and measurement team for our community relations staff to help us continue to evolve our methodology around, again, operational efficiency as well as measurement. And so I think we'll get better at it, but it isn't going to be a one-size-fits-all approach because it allows us to do better research, to have better ways to measure and track our impact over time. It's helping us look at the systems required to do that tracking over time, which I think is an important part of measurement as well. And so it's a complicated question.
Would you be willing to share best practice?
When we develop something I think are worth sharing? No. We certainly have decent ones, but there's room for improvement.
I just want to also note that this is part of what makes, I think, national service programs right now very good investments for corporations. Over the last 4 years, every single grantee of federal dollars in the Learn and Serve, Senior Corps, AmeriCorps, Vista space has, they've come up with their portfolios of long-term and intermediate-term impacts. So the entire national service portfolio is ready to speak with corporations about that.
I've been very patient. Yeah.
I'm Scott Beal from Atlas Corps. We take developing world leaders to volunteer in the United States as almost like a reverse Peace Corps, as Harris Walker would call it. We developed a partnership with DuPont where they sponsored some of our fellows from India as a way to engage nonprofit leaders in the developing world and engage stakeholders. And I'm curious, with so many big international companies here, are there other successful models in engaging the developing world in partnership as opposed to just sending money and talent overseas?
We do it with leadership development. We bring customers, partners, government officials in to experience our brand of leadership development. They decide who's going to come. They aren't always people we're selling to. And it's a 2-week program typically. And the idea is to introduce them to ethics, everything from ethics to business practices to basic leadership development that a lot of our companies take for granted. And there's probably 1,000 of them now running around in 50 different countries that at least have experienced our way to think about it.
Over here. We'll come over here next.
Hi, I'm Barbara Metzler. Corporate America is getting $12.7 billion in philanthropy a year, plus the service that you are all encouraging. I just want to thank you for what you're doing. You represent the best of some of the corporations that are giving and are doing. I think it was 1958 that it was, before that it was even illegal for corporations to give, so you are the leaders, and I thank you. I just want to know quickly, do you think that the trend of giving by corporations will reverse in this coming year because of the recession, the economic times?
I don't think so. If you look at the people we're hiring, back to the point that Jim made, they look carefully at what your social responsibility game plan is, and they're not looking at the brochures. I mean, everybody's got brochures, right? Everybody talks about it. They really look you in the eye and say, okay, what kind of a company is this? And is this the kind of place I'm going to want to hang around?
Very true.
And I don't see that changing because there's economic downturn or a recession. I think it makes it tougher sometimes. You know, you have to thread the needle a little more carefully, but I don't see a big decline at all.
Okay, I said we'd go over here for the next question.
My name's Jenny Yancey, and I represent Youth Give. We're kind of the giving side of service. We believe that you also have to look holistically, which I appreciate Kenneth highlighting for all of us to be thinking about. I think not only as a corporation or as a community, but families do need to be able to think holistically, and I appreciate Steve raising that question earlier about children and families. When one thinks about giving, you take the broad definition, time, talent, and treasure. You have to figure out how to integrate those three for all of us as a family, as a corporation, as a community, as a school. And it's a very exciting time, I think, in this moment in our country to begin to kind of look back at who we are, not only as a nation, but who we are as a corporate sector, a government sector, and also as a kind of civil society sector, if you will, as families. We had the fortunate opportunity to study how individuals choose to become philanthropic in this world, and especially in this country. And Ford, Packard, Kellogg, and Hewlett Foundations funded us to just ask people, where do you go to find resources to help you as a family be philanthropic? And after a 3-year study, we saw that mainly all of us need tools. We need tools provided to us if we're employed by our corporation. We need tools provided to us if we are a school and we're a pupil, or a family supporting their child in school. And we need tools from all different facets of our society, faith-based included. And the easy tools that are out there are sometimes staring us in the face, and yet we haven't yet created some of them. So I'd like to ask you, as you think about putting together the question of how now shall we live, which I think is really the bigger question at heart right now as we begin to think about this leverage point, this tipping point. And I'd love to ask each of you as a corporation, when you think about the tools you can offer not only your community, not only your nation, but also your world, and I appreciate the global component to this. What are those tools you can more specifically provide the rest of us?
All right, Kenneth?
You know, a lot of it is, the entrepreneurism is a powerful word in business, but I think also in the social outreach. And we have a myriad of initiatives that we do. For example, I think Jim was referring before to the problem with the world of the prison system and criminal justice system, and I went with Maria one day, and we saw the Innocence Project production here in New York, and then we contacted them, and you've got these people who are on life sentences, and they've come out of prison because of DNA analysis and evidence that's submitted years later, and invariably without any of their support system. Their safety net's all gone, families, friends, jobs, they're not even employable, and they don't have anything even wear to, so we supply wardrobes to anybody that comes out. Easy to do, not that many of them unfortunately, but it's easy to do. We have a shoe drive that we've been doing now since 1990. Every February we had a dilemma because we had our own stores and you couldn't compete in our own stores, we couldn't go on sale, so instead every February we did our campaign. We said, unfortunately too many people would love to be in your shoes. Bring in a pair that you don't wear, someone that could, and we'll give you a discount on a new pair. We collected over 1 million pair of shoes over a period of time. Business was served, community goodwill was gained, community benefited. And I did that in conjunction with Help USA, an organization my wife runs, who's sitting in the back. And we do every AIDS walk across the country with family, and everybody's families are encouraged to be part of this, and we kind of have this self-imposed kind of competitive spirit of who can turn out more people and raise more money. And so, but there's a myriad of things that we do, and they're easy, and they serve the business needs at the same time that they develop, and they help the business. So,
I'd say for Target, one of the greatest tools we provide is based on one of our greatest brand attributes. That's marketing, right? When you think about Target, we have an incredibly cool, innovative brand. And so to the extent we're able to leverage our marketing expertise to talk about the importance of having a sustainable giving program, of which service is an important component, that's a tremendous gift and tool that we provide. Because awareness is critical, I think, to bringing one value to those who are already engaged in the work, and sharing the best practices for those who would like to be involved in the work and aren't quite sure how to do it, and to just make it cool. I mean, last night, for those of you who were there, sort of this making government cool again. I think you have to make sure that it is accessible and that you're not using lingo that is sort of for those of us in this room who have these interesting terms and acronyms and are talking in a way that doesn't engage your core audience. So know your guest, who you're trying to engage, and are you talking to them in a way that is relevant and credible and accessible? And that's the way that I think we've been able to engage not only our own team members, but our guests and other key stakeholders, because we share it in a way that is relevant and is accessible, and that is not just us talking to them, but with them and doing the work in a way that is collaborative and meaningful.
I'd flip the question around too and say, what can you do or we do together to make it easier for people and companies and families who aren't involved today to get involved? And if you think about this effort, yesterday and today, that's got to be one of the significant outcomes. Because somebody said it before, everybody in this room gets it. So yeah, GE can do more, and Target can do more, and Deloitte and Kenneth Cole, I mean, we can all do more, and we will do more. But that solving the big problems is going to take more from us and something from the crowd that isn't in the game.
A lot more people at the table are needed.
Right.
I think we had a hand back here. Pass the mic.
Hey, I'm Ben Goldish from Good.
Hey, Ben.
Hey, Gene. Just curious about how you guys integrate your community relations with your marketing efforts toward the sense of how do your marketing dollars drive impact, and then how does your impact drive revenue?
I think it,
How much time do you have?
Right. I'm like, well,
Can you answer that in 1 minute?
You have a flip chart? I mean, where do you even go?
I think they're just simply the broad, it's not a specific answer to the follow-up questions you made for sure, but what does the brand stand for, and what do people think when they see Deloitte Green Dot? And can you influence what they think about that brand?
ServiceNation Summit. How much was your marketing department involved in the target brand's involvement in the ServiceNation Summit? And how much was the community relations decision?
Equally at the table. I think we've benefited from saying that success at Target is an integrated strategic approach. And so it is not just the community relations department who is involved in creating and driving our strategy. We're successful because it includes the marketing department, it includes Target Financial Services and our HR department. And so for us, that's a measure of success, and that we're at the table at the same time. So we're looking against the criteria to ensure it's obviously a credible and reputable philanthropic initiative, but we bring them immediately so that we can leverage the strengths of our entire company.
But the point is that it's not a subset of marketing. It actually enjoys people seeing at the table.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and your point is right on. Your point is right on, which is as long as service is a silo within a company and not integrated in any way into the main operations and focus. Yeah.
Well, in fact, one of the things we've done too, in fact, Lisa Campbell in the back of the room on my team, wait, please. I know, she's scared. Lisa's scared.
She's handing out business cards.
I didn't do it, I swear. She's many hats that she wears, but gosh, maybe 3-4 years ago, we developed an internal partnerships department, and so with the specific objective of developing blended business community interests with every single pyramid in the organization. We did a prioritization against our strategic objectives, but again, the point is we already have the buy-in from the entire company, but how do we ensure that it's more intentional, more strategic, and that our objectives are truly aligned so that, again, you're at the table at the same time. Great example, when 10 years ago when we launched our credit card, the Red Card, sat down at the table with our financial services team and said, let's launch it with a philanthropic layer. That launch led to Take Charge of Education, where our guests can donate 1% of their credit card purchases to a K-12 school of their choice. 10 years in, $230 million have gone to the nation's K-12 schools. So it's the little pilot and test that, truly drove change, even in terms of our overall education focus. Our guest surveys align and validate the movement in our work with regard to education, and that's become one of our signature programs, one that we're most recognized for, one that aligns with business interests and fulfills a community need. But financial service was at the table, marketing was at the table, community relations was at the table, our stores organization was at the table, because we need those leaders in local markets to help drive the program as well. So very, very integrated.
So Wendy Spencer is going to ask the next question. Wendy serves on the President's Council on Service and Civic Participation through her role, which is appointed by Governor Christ in Florida to run all of the service efforts in Florida. So Wendy, your question.
Thank you, Jean. Back to John's comment about expanding our choir, our family. I've been thinking about this for 2 days. We are the choir. We're singing it. You are acting it. We're trying to help in leading the service world. But we really need to mobilize and energize and expand our family. And one secret might be in our governors. If we had our corporate leaders asking our governors to really step up and reach out to the national and state companies, corporations, and higher education in our states to do this. So we'll help Governor Chris, Governor Schwarzenegger. We have several governors here and engaged, but we certainly need the National Governors Association on this train with us, because this a perfect time to address the needs in our country is now, and this partnership is wonderful. So I'll ask for your help for that.
All right, great. I see Michelle Nunnis in the back, and you know, John Rice is on our panel. I don't think I mentioned that he heads up the Corporate Services Council for Points of Light Hands-On, which is a collaborative of a lot of companies coming together. Michelle, do you want to comment on those efforts at all and just share them with the audience a little bit for awareness purposes?
Put me in a moment of thinking I was done for the day.
I know.
Having a McCain moment, falling asleep as he pretended to do last night. Not that it's not riveting, just that it's. But
nice
I will say that we are thrilled that John has joined us to lead the Corporate Service Council. It was started with Bob Nardelli of Home Depot, and then Mike Eske with UPS. We have 60 corporations that are joining together in a commitment around really creating a collective action agenda for corporate America to really re-energize and reimagine the possibilities for corporate engagement, and certainly are excited to be in support of the pro bono movement and the $1 billion in change, and also creating more research and case studies around the ROI. How can we measure the fact that businesses really do benefit from their engagement? And then how do we create sustainable impact in specific and concrete areas through the concerted efforts of corporations? So I think we have hopefully an opportunity to help support the larger field and really become a platform that works in partnership with others to make a difference in this corporate arena.
Thanks, Michelle, because you've been a great leader on the corporate front for service. Why don't we take one more question back here, and then I think we'll go to closing comments from our panel. Back here.
Hi, I wanted to know about if you guys could address the problem of businesses whose practices aren't consistent with their service. In other words, a business that gives to a charity for children but uses child labor, right, to make the product. I want to just know how you guys avoid doing that, and how you can suggest to other business leaders how they can avoid being kind of morally and ethically inconsistent in their business. And
sure. Can you tell us who you are?
I'm Katie Halper.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I think that's leadership, right? So it's you have to live your values, and that definitely starts at the top. And one of the things I think, Target recently was named one of the most ethical companies, and that's something that we've enjoyed for many, many years. But it's because we have standards and values, and we all talk about those values, and those are clearly articulated, and you hire against those values, and you make sure that your words and actions align. And when they don't, you hold yourself accountable and ensure that you're making those course corrections in a way that are very honest and authentic, because we're all human. And so when you are human, there are certainly mistakes, but they should be an exception to the rule, not the rule. And then when something does happen, people give you the benefit of the doubt and help you, I think, kind of change what might be inappropriate behavior. But having clear standards matter. Ensuring that those are clearly articulated. We have ethics training and courses around it, and it's a best team survey where we ask people, if something unethical happens, do you know how to report it? Both confidential ways that people can do it, as well as what we hope are very open discussions around things where people may have questions that are inappropriate and don't align with our values. So it's something, again, that you have to articulate, live, and breathe, and make people pay the consequences when they're not doing what they're supposed to do.
Any other comments on that?
Pretty good answer.
I guess.
Kenneth?
You can only do what you can do, and you put forth your best efforts, and you only know what you know, and you put in place mechanisms to monitor that which you can, and there's a lot of third-party transactions and overseas and subcontracting and subcontracting, but you do what you can and you hope for the best, because at the end of the day, I'm not sure you can really cover all bases.
And I think we're judged by what we do after we know there's an exception.
Yeah.
You can do everything you can to try to prevent it, but if in fact you do then become later aware, I think leadership is really judged by what they do after they became aware.
I think that's right. So at this point, I'm just going to give the panelists an opportunity to share any closing thoughts they have, and then we'll adjourn. Laisha, why don't you kick us off?
Okay.
And if you don't have any, you can just say, I don't have any.
Closing thought would be to go out and be evangelists, right? So it's back to my comment around awareness. We're preaching to the choir here, and so often you come to these conferences and we see a lot of the same people and hear from a lot of the same voices. And it's important, I think, to have more people under the tent. And so, to the extent that we can build greater awareness of the value proposition in service, overall corporate responsibility, I think that we've done a great service to the sector. And it's important to talk about the role that business plays. I think so often businesses get a bad rap. And I was sharing with someone, I was one of those people when I started working for our company 16 years ago out of college. I was thinking I'd go to the Peace Corps and got a part-time job and never left because I thought, the man doesn't give to the community. And, now I'm, the woman, but it's, there is this skepticism around, can companies do good? And, at the end of the day, when you look at surveys, people now are beginning to trust companies more. And so there is a momentum there. And I think there's something to be said about the leadership that can be provided, the expertise that exists in the corporate context, and the ability to drive change in a very meaningful and sustainable way, and often more quickly, given the resources that are disposable in a way that is innovative and risk-taking. So there's something to leverage, and building our trust and a capital around that trust, and then leveraging all the potential that's harnessed within our organizations, I think is tremendous. And so we have a sell job yet to do, it seems to me, and that we have to all figure out how to get the word out and then to execute against that word so that we can just do more and do more quicker.
Great, thanks. John?
The question is, where do we go from here? Somebody said it, I think, at lunch, and it's really true. Status quo is not an option. So staying where we are, if you're in the have category, is not an option. And staying where we are, if you're in the have-not category, should never be an option. And we're either going to go forward or backwards. So the question for all of us, whatever time we spent here, is what do we take away that's going to ensure that we go forward and solve some of these problems? And so because staying the same it's not an option. You can't. You won't. If you try to stay the same, you'll fall behind.
I was just struck as I was coming. First of all, my compliments to all of you for what you do, and for those of you that actually were the catalyst to bring this together. I think this is very exciting, and I think a very exciting moment. And I was reminded of a book I read on a flight some number of years ago. It was written by John Chancellor after he stepped down as the NBC anchor, and his title was Promise or Peril. And the thesis of the book was, he believed that for this country we were, either had great promise in front of us or we were at great peril in terms of maintaining our status on the world stage. And then his solution was military or public service mandatory for all of our young people as they were coming through, and believed that was the thesis of the greatest generation that came. And so this whole notion of becoming a catalyst to really get to that tipping point and pushing service to a whole new level, and the theme that we have here of this notion of Service Nation, I think is a very exciting opportunity for us. And I think each one of us need to be the change.
Great, great. David?
I want to hit 4 things very quickly. First of all, for those of you who are not used to hearing Jean, I'm sure that today, listening to her moderate was a pleasure. I need to tell you what an incredible force she's been on the President's Council for Service and Civic Life. And what a force she's been, particularly in this space, around rallying corporate America. Second, I wanted to point out Stan Soloway, who's on my board of directors of the Corporation for National Community Service. The board, Stan's been asked for the board to be our liaison within the corporate community. And as transition happens, which it will at the corporation, Stan and the board are going to be making sure that a lot of these initiatives maintain. Three, I want to just make sure folks focus on this unsexy word, research. The level of what we know today that we didn't know a few years ago about the impact that boomers and millennials are having in the workplace and in the volunteering space. What we know today about what happens to productivity in companies that do volunteering, that do philanthropy, what happens to morale, to recruitment, to retention. We have deep information now, and so it's important for us as we do this outreach to be relying on some of the facts. And then finally, I just want to note, from my point of view, we have a window that's open to us, and I think we all felt it today, certainly from the government side, and we feel it together within the nonprofit community. What you're seeing up here, I think, shows that this window is open in the corporate sector, and I can tell you, I meet with companies all the time, and there's a level of searching to find the right way to engage. Even as you'd think that people will be pulling in their horns as a result of the downturn in the economy, the pressures from the boomers and the millennials and this need to fix some of the key challenges around our communities and particularly education, I believe is forcing more businesses into this space. And so it's the perfect opportunity to push through that window and bring some change.
Great, thank you, David.
I guess the one point I just want to reiterate is that the reality that business and philanthropy are not only not independent, but they're interdependent. And I think we all know that, and I think they need and rely upon each other to sustain themselves. Businesses have extraordinary resources. We all have extraordinary resources. We have virtual resources. We have physical resources that we could apply to this agenda. There's companies that are not as big as ours, like GE, Deloitte, and Target, that that struggle with a lot of these notions. But and then I'll just kind of leave you with two thoughts. And one is that that we're talking about awareness, and awareness is important, but to be aware is not more important than what you wear. And finally, we can change the world. We can make an extraordinary. If we can't change the world and make an extraordinary difference alone, together we can be an accessory.
I dare you.
How do you follow those one-liners, man? I just want to thank our panel, and let me say, in the time that we've been gathered here today, two important private sector commitments have been made. One from PwC, all 31,000 employees will get an additional 10 hours of paid time off for community service, and this will result in 300,000 more hours of service. Bank of America has made an additional $20 million commitment over the next 4 years to strengthen youth engagement efforts in their communities. So the point being, wouldn't it be great if every day was like today? I mean, if we had, really, if we had the coming together and the momentum, but that's obviously what ServiceNation is all about. A commitment by all of us, kind of to join hands, and to go out there, and as we've heard every panelist say, it's who's not at the table that we have to be focused on, and some of these companies are at the table already, but they're expanding their commitments. So I want to thank our awesome group of panelists. And David Eisner mentioned transitions, and I just want to say that as David leaves his role as the winds of Washington dictate every election season, I think David's done a great job of putting national service on the national agenda, providing great opportunities for the private sector to come along and sort of showing us the way on how a larger framework can take place. So thank you all, and thanks, Sergeant.